Why does every generation seem convinced that the one after it is ruining the world? We've all heard the chorus, "Kids these days don't want to work. Back in my day, we had real class." This new generation is destroying everything we built. It's so familiar, it almost feels scripted. As if every parent secretly receives a handbook titled, "How to Complain About the Youth." But here's the twist. These complaints aren't modern. They're ancient. Nearly 3,000 years ago, the poet Hesiod lamented that the young were lazy, shallow, and addicted to pleasure. Plato worried that the Athenian youth disrespected their elders and indulged too much. Their words sound less like philosophy and more like a Facebook rant that could have been written yesterday. The script repeats across centuries. In the 1960s, mothers in pearls recoiled at the sight of miniskirts, the same skirts that made Twiggy an icon. In the 1990s, Clueless turned Cher's plaid miniskirt into a cultural fantasy, while mothers fretted about modesty. And today, TikTok trends like the clean girl, the mob wife, and the coquette are reported in headlines as if they herald the end of civilization. The fashions shift, the aesthetics recycle, but the reaction never changes. Older generations see decline. Younger generations see freedom. This video essay is about that tension, the deep mechanics of generational hate, why mothers and daughters in particular seem locked in this eternal clash, and why, if we look closely at history, we'll find that despite all the pearl clutching and moral panic, nothing really changed at all. And hello everyone, my name is Laura and welcome to my channel. Halloween isn't just about costumes anymore, it's about the little rituals that make the season last. That's why I partnered with Wild to share their brand new Halloween collection. This drop launches October 2nd and features 4 limited edition designs: the Ghost Case, a US exclusive and bestseller, plus cat eyes, lilac ghost cats, and skull and roses, perfect for adding a touch of eerie elegance to your routine, or for building your own boo basket. What I love about Wild is how easy it is to refill. Just twist, pop in the refill, and you're good to go. I made the switch because I wanted something sustainable and reliable, and it's kept me feeling fresh for 24 hours. All of Wild's products are made with premium, reusable cases and plastic-free refills, and they're certified vegan and Leaping Bunny approved. Since launching, they've saved 1.6 million pounds of single-use plastic from a landfill. That's why I love supporting them. So treat yourself this Halloween with Wild. Click the link in my description, scan the QR code, and use my promo code LauraJane for 20% off. But hurry, because my code doesn't last long. Because the best Halloween ritual isn't just the costume, it's the little daily acts of care that make you feel good all season long. Alright, let's jump right back into the main video. Chapter 1, a tradition as old as time. Every generation believes it has invented rebellion, but history proves otherwise. For as long as we've had parents and children, we've had tension between them. Across civilizations, elders have recorded their despair at the audacity of the young. In ancient China, Confucian scholars warned of declining respect, laminating that sons no longer bowed deeply enough or recited their lessons with sufficient reverence. The anxiety wasn't really about posture or syllables. It was about continuity, a fear that the values of one age would vanish in the next. Medieval Europe had its own moral panics. Clerics chastised boys for growing their hair long, dyeing it blonde, or wearing tunics cut scandalously high. These weren't just fashion critiques, they were condemnations of character. Long hair was a symbol of vanity, short tunics a sign of lust. To dress differently was to invite accusations of sin. In the 14th century England, moralists even complained that young men's sleeves were too wide and their hemlines too short. The debates sound almost comical now, but they reveal the truth. Kids these days have been shocking wardrobes since the Middle Ages. By the 18th century, European courts produced a new theater of scandal. Imagine Versailles glittering with powdered wigs, stacked like architectural marbles, silk stockings, bright rouge, and beauty patches shaped like moons and stars. To us, these are hallmarks of Marie Antoinette glamour, decadent, romantic, and endlessly aestheticized in period films. But to critics of the time, they were a sign of decline. Pamphlets accused young aristocrats of being vain, frivolous, even unpatriotic, for fussing over powder and rouge while the nation strained under debt. Just as teenagers today are mocked for selfies, the youth of Versailles were accused of worshipping their own reflections. The 19th century delivered its rebellion in the form of bloomers. When women's rights activist Amelia Bloomer popularized loose trousers for women, the backlash was immediate and vicious. Newspapers ran cartoons depicting women in bloomers as grotesque, with exaggerated limbs and mocking captions. They were accused of being unfeminine, unnatural, and socially disruptive. To wear bloomers in public was to invite ridicule, jeers, and sometimes harassment. Yet to the women who adopted them, bloomers weren't about scandal. They were about mobility. They wanted to walk freely, breathe deeply, and claim just a fraction of the comfort their brothers had always enjoyed. It was in many ways the 1850s equivalent of girls being criticized online today for refusing to conform to narrow beauty standards. And then came the 1920s flapper, one of the most iconic figures of generational rebellion. Imagine Louise Brooks with her razor-sharp bob, dark kohl circling her eyes, and lips painted in bold Cupid's bows. Her dress trimmed with fringe revealed knees that had never before seen daylight in polite society. She smoked cigarettes in public, danced to the pulse of jazz, and laughed with unguarded joy. For Edwardian mothers who had grown up under corsets, high collars, and tightly laced modesty, the flapper looked like an unraveling of civilization. But for young women who had lived through the devastation of World War I, she was something entirely different. She embodied freedom, survival, and the determination to live fully in the face of a world that has shown how fragile life could be. Every era insists it is witnessing the final unraveling of tradition, the death of propriety, the loss of values. And yet, time and time again, society survives. The wigs are tucked away, the bloomers folded into closets, the flapper dresses hung up, only to be remembered later with nostalgia. As the film Midnight in Paris reminds us, every generation romanticizes its own youth as a golden age, forgetting that once upon a time, they too were the scandal, the shock, and the source of outrage. Chapter 2. Mothers, Daughters, and the Policing of Femininity. If generational conflict is universal, it burns brightest between mothers and daughters. Across centuries, femininity has been the battleground where cultural anxieties are staged. Hemlines, hairstyles, lipstick shades, even the way a woman walks. None of it has ever been neutral. Every choice is read as a statement, a challenge, or a surrender. And because femininity is so often tied to morality, respectability, and social value, these conflicts carry far more weight than they appear on the surface. Take the 1920s bob. To Edwardian mothers who had grown up buttoned up into long gowns, corseted into stiffness, and trained to embody restraint, the bob was more than a haircut. It was a manifesto scrawled across the body. Kohl eyeliner wasn't mere decoration. It was rebellion, painted in black across the eyes. If The Great Gatsby sparkled with the glamour of flappers, it also captured the unease of a world watching its daughters dance away from the traditions that had defined their mothers' lives. To the older generation, this was decadence, a reckless gamble with propriety. But to the daughters, it was oxygen. After the trauma of World War I, young women wanted to breathe, to move, to live in ways their mothers had never been allowed. In the 1960s, the cycle repeated with new costumes. Mothers shaped by the polished domestic ideals of the 1950s. Think Leave It to Beaver, June Cleaver, pearls perfectly strung, dresses pressed to perfection, saw their daughters stepping into miniskirts, protest marches, and sexual liberation. Figures like Twiggy and Jean Shrimpton became icons of a new girlhood that was unapologetically visible, unabashedly young, and unafraid of breaking rules. To mothers, the shift looked like a loss of dignity, a casting off of respectability that had been hard-won in a world that valued women primarily for their roles as wives and mothers. To daughters, though, it was autonomy at last. The miniskirt wasn't just a hemline, it was a claim to space, freedom, and ownership over their body wearing it. By the 1990s, another rift opened. Mothers who had fought to be taken seriously in boardrooms during the 1980s, their armor, the working girl power suit, padded shoulders, lacquered lipstick, and blowouts, were baffled to see their daughters dressing like Winona Ryder in Reality Bites, thrifted flannels, messy eyeliner, unkempt hair, and eyebrows plucked into paper-thin arches. To the older generation, this looked like surrender, as though their daughters were rejecting the polish and authority that had cost so much to achieve. But to Gen X girls, it was authenticity. They didn't want to be polished into corporate products. They wanted to reject a glossy world that felt artificial. Grunge wasn't weakness, it was refusal. The tension is not new. In the Victorian era, mothers who had grown up in stiff crinolines were horrified to see their daughters in simpler gowns and looser silhouettes. In the 1970s, second-wave feminists who had burned bras looked at their daughters in glittery disco dresses in shock, wondering whether progress was being undone. Again and again, mothers interpret their daughters' choices as wasteful, frivolous, or regressive, while daughters interpret their mother's rules as cages disguised as heirlooms. What becomes clear is that the conflict was never just about fabric or makeup. A hemline is not just a hemline. A lipstick shade is not just color. Each choice represents a larger argument about what femininity should mean. Older women see their hard-won progress slipping away, whether it's respectability, stability, or professional credibility. Younger women see those same rules as outdated burdens, and they yearn to invent their own rituals. And so femininity becomes a battleground where identity, inheritance, and rebellion collide. Clothing in this light is never just clothing. It is meaning. It is a daughter saying, "I am not you." And it's a mother replying, "But I made you, don't throw me away." Chapter 3. Nostalgia and the fear of being obsolete. Beneath every generational complaint lies something quieter, something more tender than rage, grief. What looks like disdain for kids these days is often mourning in disguise. Nostalgia has a way of convincing us that the years of your youth were not just special, but definitive, the golden age against which everything else must be measured. The styles, the music, the rituals of our youth become proof that we belonged, that we were vibrant, that we mattered. When the world moves on, abandoning those markers, it can feel like abandonment for us. For women in the 1950s, femininity was defined by cinched waists, pressed skirts, and polished hair. These rituals weren't just aesthetics, they were a daily performance of discipline, dignity, and worth. Every pleat ironed, every curl set was a reassurance that they were fulfilling their role. So when the 1960s and 1970s erupted with hippie looseness, denim jeans, fringe vests, braless bodies, hair flowing long and wild, many mothers saw disrespect, even sloppiness. But beneath the critique was something more fragile. The realization that the rules they had mastered, the rituals that gave their lives structure, no longer mattered. Mad Men dramatizes this poignantly. Betty Draper, ever the perfect 1960s housewife, presses her dresses and applies her lipstick with precision, while her daughter Sally stares at a future where such rituals feel irrelevant, even oppressive. The generational divide isn't just aesthetic, it's existential. Fast forward to today, and the cycle repeats in digital form. Millennials who came of age in the early 2000s treat skinny jeans and side parts as sacred relics of their prime. These weren't just style choices, they were markers of coming into adulthood, of first jobs, of first loves, of claiming an identity in a rapidly globalizing world. Now Gen Z mocks them mercilessly, elevating baggy jeans, chunky sneakers, and middle parts as symbols of their own youth. On TikTok, the debates read like comedy skits, lighthearted sparring between generations. But beneath the laughter lies something serious, the quiet dread of being obsolete, the sinking realization that your cultural moment has passed. That the look which once defined cool is now dated, even ridiculed. Makeup and fashion work as memory palaces. A lipstick shade isn't just pigment, it's the memory of a first kiss. A haircut isn't just strands of hair, it's the soundtrack of a certain summer. Frosted lip gloss recalls Y2K malls filled with Britney Spears blasting overhead. Winged eyeliner might conjure high school bathrooms where friends huddle to share mascara. Each aesthetic choice is a time capsule, carrying not only beauty but belonging. That's why the rejection of these styles feels so painful. When younger generations dismiss or make a parody of them, it feels like a personal erasure, as though the world is saying, your rituals don't matter anymore. And if those rituals don't matter, does that mean you don't matter either? Generational hate then isn't really anger. It's grief disguised as disdain. A mother scolding her daughter for being too casual. A millennial mocking a Gen Z outfit on TikTok. Both are expressing the same anxiety, that the world is moving forward, leaving them behind. It's not the hemline or hairstyle that stings. It's the reminder that time has moved on, and with it, the version of ourselves that once felt immortal. Chapter 4, The Cycle of Aesthetics. Here's the irony. Nothing really disappears. Fashion and beauty don't vanish, they hibernate. Trends lie dormant for a decade or two, then return with new life. Polished, remixed, and rebranded as fresh. What one generation trashes as an embarrassment, the next resurrects with pride. Aesthetic memory works like a carousel. The ride always circles back, but the riders change. Take the Y2K revival. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, juicy couture tracksuits, rhinestone belts, and butterfly clips were cultural punchlines. Millennials look back at their teenage photos with visible cringe, promising never to touch low-rise jeans again. But now, Gen Z curates these items like sacred relics, reviving velour tracksuits on TikTok hauls and pairing rhinestone accessories with ironic detachment. What was once buried in the shame has been reborn as a badge of nostalgic cool, a declaration that even bad taste has its renaissance. The same thing has happened with the 1970s. For years, polyester suits, shag carpets, and bold geometric prints were dismissed as kitsch, remembered with the embarrassed tones of disco's decline. But decades later, those same elements have been reinterpreted as exuberant, unapologetically playful. After a decade of beige minimalism and quiet luxury, the pendulum has swung back to maximalism. Glitter, sequins, and statement prints feel intoxicating again, precisely because they reject restraint. What mothers once labeled tacky, daughters now celebrate as bold. Even Clueless makes the cycle clear. Cher's wardrobe, plaid minis, knee-high socks, and fitted blazers was a 1990s preppy fantasy, but it was itself a remix of the 1960s mod silhouettes. And today, Gen Z resurrects Cher's outfits all over again, posting thrift store finds and TikTok recreations with the same delight. The aesthetic loop is not just cyclical, it's recursive, each generation referencing the last while insisting it's entirely new. This is why generational hate is so deeply ironic. Women who once wore miniskirts scolded their daughters for wearing ripped jeans. Mothers who experimented with 1970s excess dismiss the glitter of the 2000 club culture. Millennials who lived in their skinny jeans roll their eyes at Gen Z's oversized denim, forgetting that baggy pants were the uniform of 1990s rebellion. Every complaint is a mirror. We criticize the very cycle we once embodied. Fashion is less a straight line and more a spiral staircase. Each turn feels like an ascent into something new. But when you look down, you realize you've been circling the same axis all along. The hemlines shift, the colors change, but the impulse to rebel, to distinguish, to define a generation through aesthetics remains constant. Nothing ever truly disappears. It only waits its turn to return, dressed up in the gloss of nostalgia. Chapter 5, What It Really Says About Us. When we pull back far enough, the truth becomes clear. Generational hate is rarely about the young. It is, instead, a mirror reflecting the fears of the old. Every complaint about hemlines, slang, music, or lipstick is not simply irritation, it's a confession of fear. Fear of aging, fear of irrelevance, fear of fading into the invisibility while the world directs its attention to someone newer, fresher, and younger. For women, this fear is magnified 100-fold. Our culture idolizes youth and punishes age with a kind of ruthless efficiency. Young women are sexualized, photographed, and consumed as cultural currency, while older women are pushed to the margins, their wisdom eclipsed by the glow of youth. The effect is scarcity. It creates the illusion that there's only enough cultural spotlight for one generation of women at a time. And so, inevitability, mothers sometimes resent their daughters, not because they disapprove of their choices, but because their daughters remind them of what they have lost, or what society has taken away from them. Hollywood has always staged this conflict in brutal clarity. Think of Sunset Boulevard, where Norma Desmond clings desperately to the spotlight as a new generation of starlets rises. Or All About Eve, where Bette Davis's aging actress is replaced by a younger version of herself. These films reveal a cultural script that pits generations of women against one another, as though the success of one can only come at the expense of the other. The same narrative plays out in daily life. Younger women are called frivolous, reckless, or dangerous. Older women are dismissed or outdated, irrelevant, or bitter. Both are diminished and both are divided. This division is not accidental. Generational hate among women keeps the cycle of insecurity alive. Instead of questioning why society demands constant reinvention from women but not men, we aim our circumstances at each other. A teenager's crop top becomes a scandal. A mother's refusal to dye her hair becomes a failure. In both cases, the real problem isn't the women making choices. It's the stage they've been forced to perform on. And yet, generational hate is not inevitable. It's a habit, and habits, though deeply ingrained, can be unlearned. We could choose to see the next generation not as a threat, but as a continuation. Every lipstick shade, every hairstyle, every hemline is part of the same story, rewritten in new ink with each generation. The rituals shift, the ball becomes the beehive becomes the blowout becomes the messy bun. But the dance itself remains unchanged. So the next time a trend makes you roll your eyes, baggy jeans, frosted lip gloss, glitter eyeshadow, or a slick bun, pause. Remember that once your reflection startled your mother and other people. Remember that once you were the girl with the haircut, the hemline, the makeup that made someone older sigh. Kids these days. And remember too that the daughters being scolded today will one day be the mothers doing the scolding for tomorrow. Maybe the most radical act we can perform is to step out of the cycle, to admire what is new without fear, to honor what has came before without bitterness, to insist that there is a space for multiple generations of women to shine at once. Because beneath all the noise, all the pearl clutching, all the headlines declaring the end of civilization, nothing really has changed at all, only the costumes. And the beauty of the performance is that it continues, endlessly, with every new generation taking its turn in the spotlight. So why does every generation hate the next one? Because it's never really been about them. It's always been about us, about our fear of aging, our fear of being left behind, our fear of the rituals that once defined us will be discarded as outdated relics. What looks like a scorn for kids these days is often grief in disguise, grief for the selves we once were, and for the cultural power we can feel slipping away. History shows us that the script never changes. Plato complained about Athenian youth. Victorian mothers gasped at bloomers. Parents in the 1960s recoiled at miniskirts. Millennials mocked Gen Z's baggy jeans. Each generation is certain that its youth was the golden age, and each forgets that it was once accused of ruining everything. The stage changes, the costumes rotate, but the performance is eternal. For women, the conflict carries sharper stakes. Culture pits youth and age against each other, idolizing one and erasing the other. Mothers and daughters become rivals on a stage too small, forced to fight for visibility instead of recognizing themselves as chapters in the same story. But what if we could see things differently? What if every hemline, every lipstick, every viral aesthetic was not an ending, but a continuation? The truth is, nothing is ever really lost. Styles return, aesthetics recycle. The same anxieties resurface, dressed in new fabrics. The bob becomes a beehive, the miniskirt becomes a maxi, and the juicy tracksuit returns with rhinestones intact. The cycle isn't decline, it's renewal. Maybe the most radical thing we can do is step out of the cycle, to resist the reflex to mock what's new, to honor what came before without bitterness, to make room for multiple generations to shine together, not in competition but in chorus. So the next time a trend makes you roll your eyes, a slick bun, a rhinestone belt, or a lipstick shade that feels too much, remember this one. Once upon a time, you startled your mother's reflection. And someday, the girls who bewilder us now will be bewildered by their own daughters. The cycle is inevitable, but our disdain is not. Because beneath all the pearl clutching, beneath every headline announcing the end of civilization, one truth remains. Nothing really changed at all. Only the outfits did. And isn't that what makes the story beautiful? That it keeps going, generation after generation, stitched together in fabric, memory, and style. Let me know in the comments below. I mean, I definitely noticed this with like jean trends because like I basically stopped wearing jeans maybe like 10 years ago, in part because I just don't really like the look of the whole super baggy like 1990s style jeans, just because I find them just not flattering on me personally. And I'm really into the 1970s, and I just like vintage inspired fashion, like floral dresses. I just find dresses more comfortable for me personally. So I think it's just about too, like certain trends as you get older just aren't that flattering. Like I can't envision myself wearing what I wore in the early 2000s because I feel like those super low jeans and those like short tops, they're just some really ugly styles, to be honest. But like maybe younger people that didn't live through that think that that's flattering and would like that style. And it's true too, like people who lived through the 70s probably will look back on that and be like, oh, I don't know if I want to wear that. Like the decor is kind of tacky because they remember it. But to me, because I wasn't around in the 70s, like I like that style. Like I love the fashion and the color palettes and the shag rug. I mean, I look back at the 60s too and I like some of the styles as well. So it's just interesting how like it kind of repeats itself, the fashion. I mean, way back like 100 years ago, obviously fashion didn't repeat itself because everything was new back then. But it'll be interesting to see what the next 100 years brings, because I feel like now nothing is new under the sun. But with the last 100 years, especially like with the 1920s and the flappers, like everything seemed new each decade. And like a new invention with like the mini skirts and the bell bottoms, and it just was different. But now I feel like it's just a regurgitation of what was once in style and just reinterpreted and remixed. So it's just interesting times, and I feel like social media really changes things as well. So let me know in your thoughts below your idea of this video topic. I mean, I definitely don't despise earlier generations or people younger than me at all. I like sometimes look at their outfits and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like I actually am kind of fascinated to see what people that are super young are wearing now, because I'm like out of the loop a little and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like I wouldn't wear it because it looked terrible on me, but like that's good for you that you like it and looks good on you. Anyways, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below.